In the closing years of the Second World War, few battles would leave as deep an impact on military history as the struggle for Iwo Jima. The island itself was small, barely 8 square miles of volcanic rock, yet it became the stage for one of the most intense confrontations between American and Japanese forces. At the heart of its defenses stood a man unlike any other commander Japan fielded during the war, Lieutenant General Kuribayashi. And the most fascinating part of his strategy was that he designed the island's defenses not only from Japanese doctrine, but heavily inspired by his knowledge of American military training. He understood American strengths intimately, and that understanding shaped every tunnel, bunker, artillery placement, and soldier's position on Iwo Jima. This is the remarkable story of how Kuribayashi used what he learned about America to build one of the most formidable defensive networks of the entire Pacific War. To understand why Kuribayashi made the decisions he did, we need to look at who he was as a person. Unlike many Japanese commanders who immersed themselves completely in Imperial Army ideology, Kuribayashi was a thinker, an observer, and in many cases, a realist. Early in his career, he was sent to the United States as a military attaché. He spent time in Washington, D.C., traveled across several American states, and learned English well enough to speak directly with American officers. He studied American culture, industry, and especially the structure of the U.S. Army. It left a lasting impression on him, an impression of a country whose industrial and technological might far exceeded what many Japanese leaders believed. During his time in America, Kuribayashi attended military demonstrations, training sessions, and war games. He watched how American troops maneuvered, how they coordinated artillery, how they used tanks, logistics, and communications. He once wrote in private letters that if war ever broke out between Japan and the United States, Japan would face a terrifying opponent, one that could produce more equipment and supply more troops than Japan could ever match. His respect was not emotional admiration, it was strategic clarity. He knew that American soldiers were physically strong, heavily supplied, and well-trained. They fought methodically, relied on overwhelming firepower, and never entered a battlefield without pounding it first with artillery and naval guns. He saw the American tendency to prioritize the safety of their troops while still maintaining aggressive forward movement. And as the war eventually approached Japan's doorstep, Kuribayashi remembered all of it. Fast forward to 1944. Japan was losing ground across the Pacific. The American, island-hopping, campaign had already captured the Marianas, and the next target was Iwo Jima. The island's airfields were crucial for Japan, and losing them would allow American bombers a direct staging point to strike Japan's home islands. Kuribayashi was appointed commander of Iwo Jima's defenses, but when he arrived, what he found was completely insufficient for the battle he knew was coming. Traditional Japanese doctrine encouraged meeting the enemy at the beach, charging into battle, and sacrificing troops in glorious, often suicidal attacks. Kuribayashi immediately rejected all of this. He knew that fighting the Americans head-on during a landing, with their naval guns and aircraft overhead, would result in instant annihilation. Instead, he began building a defense system unlike anything Japan had created before. And nearly every major component of those defenses came directly from what he had learned about American warfare years earlier. The first principle Kuribayashi recognized was that Americans loved firepower. Their standard method of attack was to soften targets with overwhelming bombardment. So he built defenses that could survive it. He ordered an underground tunnel network stretching over 16 miles, connecting bunkers, command posts, artillery positions, and storage rooms. These tunnels were not weak or hastily dug, they were reinforced with steel and concrete. Some were over 90 feet deep. He knew that the Americans would shell the island for days, but these tunnels would keep his soldiers alive, ready to fight once the bombardment ended. Another American habit Kuribayashi accounted for was the tendency to advance with tanks and infantry together. To counter this, he positioned anti-tank guns in carefully hidden enclosures. Instead of placing them on ridges where they could be spotted, he embedded them in caves angled so that they could fire across the beach and hit American armor from the side, where the armor was weakest. Every gun was protected by thick rock and volcanic ash. American pilots would fly overhead searching for targets, but the guns remained invisible until they opened fire. One of the most significant design choices came from Kuribayashi's understanding of the American soldier's discipline. He knew that Marines moved in squads with strong internal communication, and that even under fire, they kept advancing steadily rather than panicking. Traditional Japanese banzai charges would never break that discipline, they would only lead to the wholesale slaughter of Japanese troops. So Kuribayashi banned banzai charges completely. This decision shocked many of his officers, because these charges were deeply embedded in Japanese military culture as symbols of bravery. But Kuribayashi didn't care about symbolism. He cared about results. And he knew the Americans would tear such attacks apart with machine guns and artillery before they even reached the front lines. Instead of wasting manpower on suicidal charges, he spread his forces across heavily fortified inland positions. He did not want to stop the Americans from capturing the beaches. That, he believed, was impossible. Instead, he wanted to make the interior of the island a nightmare of interlocking fields of fire. Every bunker supported another. Every artillery piece had multiple hiding spots. Machine gun nests were arranged so that if one was taken out, others would immediately cover the gap with crossing fire. This system forced the Americans to fight a slow, grinding, catastrophic battle of attrition. Every inch of the island had to be earned with blood. Another key aspect Kuribayashi borrowed from American training was logistical awareness. He knew that the Americans depended on supply chains, ammunition, food, water, medical support. Kuribayashi tried to mimic that thinking within his limited resources. He designed storage rooms deep within the tunnels to keep ammunition safe from bombing. He calculated